Right. So we talk about the student experience, but we're really in a phase of how are we actually talking about the staff experience? Because staff in particular, as we went through the pandemic, as we had to reevaluate how campuses are working, how we had to get creative, they are tired. And they want to feel connected to purpose. And if they don't feel connected to purpose, they're not providing those services to the students. And so I think as business partners to higher ed, as anyone working with higher ed, is how are we helping them think about staff and providing resources there as well?
I mean, on our side of the table, that's something that over the last 4 years, we've seen a big spike in staff appreciation gifts and those touch points that leadership is having with employees for just this reason. It really became something that was highlighted over the course of the pandemic, where folks are changing seats, folks are changing institutions. Higher education saw an interesting time period, and now you're on the heels of that. How are you driving that engagement with your team moving forward? And those are all conversations we're hearing weekly and daily, frankly. So very interesting to hear that from you.
I was just at a campus visit, and I had the opportunity to sit down with someone in the business auxiliary role, but their sole purpose was about employee engagement across the campus, not just within business auxiliary, but administration, full-time, part-time, faculty. That was their entire goal. And this was kind of the purpose behind it. They were like, happy staff, happy students.
That's right.
And I thought it was brilliant because you don't always think that way. But his comment was, if the employees working in the cafeteria, the food service, if they're happy, if they're content, then the people they're serving are happy and content. He was like, the same thing for any of your advisors or your bus drivers. He was like, if these people are connected and happy, he was like, that translates to the students, to the guests, to alumni. And I hadn't seen that role, really a dedicated role across the board at other campuses. But it was just brilliant to hear the philosophy.
Were you at the University of Maryland?
I was not.
Okay. Not that we have to name drop, but yeah.
But kind of close. It was actually, I was just at University of Kentucky.
Oh, yeah, they do a great job.
It was wonderful.
Yeah. So it's interesting. A couple things come to mind is we all want to belong to something. Right. So what do you belong to is really the conversation. And I think for so long, brands as universities kind of relied on staff just feeling connected to the purpose and the mission. And when you start to think about the tenure of presidents used to be 10 years, and then it used to be 5 to 7 years, and now it's 2 to 4 years.
Right.
And when you're trying to create mission, vision, values, and the top leadership is changing over every 2 to 4 years, I mean, there's some traditions and consistency that happens in culture, but really when you're on the staff side, that's a lot of rapid change. Right. And how do you still feel connected and committed to the mission, vision of whatever that leadership's doing?
Well, and especially in a industry that is a little slower on that cycle, if you will.
That's right.
Talking about 18, 24 months earlier, just traditionally things take time. And so when you have that quick change, it even feels quicker.
Yeah. The other thing I was giving a presentation for something and I said, what other industry thinks more about their client than their employees than higher education?
That's interesting.
There you go. Everyone pauses for a second. And then people try to challenge me because everyone wants to think I'm wrong, which I'm fine with. Like, tell me why I'm wrong. People are like, well, maybe in healthcare because you think about the patient. It's like, but do you? Yeah. Do you worry about your doctors, your nurses, your x-ray technicians, and then they take care of the clients? And I think about even just today with you all, where you're all spending your time. We went through the warehouse, the production room, and it's like every single conversation was about how you're taking care of the employees, how happy they are in what they're doing, because then the product is fantastic.
Right.
Which then makes happy clients. But everything
I'm glad you walked away with that observation.
Yes,
I did.
Because we work really hard to make sure.
And I promise they're not paying me for this. That's not, these are not. But it truly was. Everyone was happy. They genuinely wanted to talk about their role. They felt cared for. You've made purchases around equipment, other pieces, environments to make sure they're happy. But higher ed, back to the delayed
Yeah.
to the program, needs and has to start taking care of their employees, or people will be leaving. They are leaving
Yeah.
at higher rates than ever before.
I can't believe it. I have a lot of relationships just across the country in my role, and I'm very fortunate to have those. But I attend a conference that we support. I called one of my longtime client partners I consider a friend, and I was like, I didn't see your name. I'm down 60% of my staff, and I just can't carve it out to go. And I feel like we had this bubble of a lot of retirement, but he was in a bubble of over half left for a different sector, not even a different campus, but a different sector. And I do feel like we're seeing that more and more. When I was on the campuses, like people 20, 30 years of being there. And I don't know if it's a tipping point and just kind of like generational, or is it just folks are more comfortable finding that next opportunity or going where they feel like the benefits are better?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, on our side, we've seen a high rise in the amount of institutions looking to revamp what years of service recognition looks like. So evolving away from some of those traditional Regal things that are nice, but they might live on a bookshelf for a long time, and transitioning that to things that really drive that employee retention conversation. As much as higher education wants to talk about retention of students, you need to talk about retention of employees.
That's right.
And how do you have those touch points that drive that engagement? So this has been a conversation we've been seeing a lot, and been able to tailor solutions that help institutions address that very real conversation that's happening right now. Mm-hmm. So it's really, I think you're onto something here, and a very relevant conversation for a lot of our listeners.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk a minute, kind of turning through. We've heard a little bit about your backstory, about the positions, and I kind of see this as a trailblazer within the field, and kind of looking at it from a woman's perspective. How do you feel about your role within leadership within the industry, and how do you see yourself supporting other women that might want to kind of follow that trail or to be their own trailblazer?
So first woman and youngest woman in most of the roles. So it's kind of
it's kind of a big deal.
Double thing, right? It's, I think I was 37, 38 years old when I got the NACA CEO role. So first woman, youngest by far. I think it's easy to, let's see how I want to say this. It's easy to take male leadership tendencies and take them on because that's what maybe equals success or has equaled success in the past. And so when I came into the NACA CEO role in particular, it was like, well, I'm really not going to wear suits and ties.
Right.
I'm just not going to do that. And it was like, okay. And for those of you who know me, I have very short hair, different haircut, mohawky-ish. But I used to have really long hair. And when I started the role, I just did. And at one point, I just cut hair. I just chopped all my hair off. And I've done it a lot throughout the years of my life. It's kind of just who I've been. And I didn't tell anyone because I got a haircut.
Right.
And when I came back, people are like, what does the board of directors think of your haircut? I was like, I don't really know. I didn't ask them.
What do they think of my haircut?
And I was like, actually, I don't really care what they think of my haircut. I don't think they get to care. And then the other great question is, what does your husband think of your haircut? Like, we are not having this conversation. So I share some of these things because I think sometimes we ask women different questions than we ask men in roles. And I think when you're going to be the first in anything, whatever the first means, right? I hold a lot of privilege in a lot of ways, right? I'm also a white woman that has privilege. I came from parents that went to college, so I wasn't first generation college student. So there's a variety of different things. But when you're the first, I think you have to decide what your values are, where your boundaries are, how you want to show up, be true to yourself, but also be flexible with the culture, the environment, because you are a part of a bigger thing. When I think about, women in spaces, I'm only successful as a trailblazer if I can be the first, but I don't want to be the last. So, right, how are you opening doors for people? How are you thinking about people? How are you diversifying? We all know jobs happen because of who you know, right? How you're connected. And so how are we thinking about who we're connected with, how we're elevating other people up, how we're bringing people to the table for conversations for a variety of different ways based on their interest. I truly believe like part of my role is being present with people, really understanding who they are and what they want to be doing, and then connecting them to wherever I can.
I love this. It's something that Bobby from Northwestern, who came on our podcast in some previous episodes, talked a lot about conduit. And as an alumni association, wanting to be the conduit for the network of current students to older generations and find that ability to connect folks and open up opportunity and the importance that that has. And it sounds very similar here, where you want to not lose sight of the way you've paved and not be the last, as you put it, but also bring people with you. We talked about that earlier. You want to bring people with you. So how do you set up yourself up to be that conduit for folks and be that network?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. And then let's loop in the like leaving piece, because when you do leave a role, you have zero control over what they do after you leave. And I think that's been one of the hardest pieces. I mean, I like control. I like to control everything. I like to pretend like I have control. We really all have no control over anything. I get it, but let's pretend like we have control, right?
Sure.
So, but I think that's one of the hardest pieces of like, I have a pretty clear vision of who could be successful in this role and why and promote. And it's like, you walk away and other people make decisions and things fall where they may. So I think it's how are you bringing people along? How are you helping promote? And just giving space to other people and being a listening ear when they feel challenged, because being the first at anything is really, really hard.
Yeah.
It just is. And, you know, if you haven't done it, you can't understand it. Right.
Yeah, I totally understand some of those things, especially being in positions where typically it had been a male role, but it had also been someone so much older, like decades older than you.
Decades.
And then some of the people, and you might get this as well, some of the people that now kind of work with you on your team are also decades older than you. So living in that space is challenging to start with, but I love your thought about what happens when you leave and knowing you have no control, but making sure that you've set that team up for as much success as they can have, that you've opened those doors for them. I always wanted it to be like, I could care less if my name was ever mentioned, but if you talk about my team or who I work for, like, that's the success, right? Because you've supported those people. You've given them their own, window. You've given them their own stage to stand on. And so for me, I love that kind of similarity. I am nowhere near a trailblazer, but knowing that the spaces I've left people with as much opportunity, giving them the spotlight as possible. And that's what I want to continue to do as I go forward.
That feels trailblazing. So let's not put yourself down out of, well, you could stay in the trailblazing space. It makes me think of a couple things, is empowering others while you're in roles.
Yeah,
right?
That's huge.
People, my sister likes to make fun of me because I'll delegate even at home. I'm like, okay, who's doing this? Who's doing that? Where are we going? She's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm delegating. But it's a family joke. It's fine. But I do think empowering people to have full ownership of whatever they're doing, exposing them whenever you can to other things that are happening that they maybe don't get. I mean, I remember being in my 20s being like, what the heck does that vice president even do just sitting around? How do they show up in meetings without a notebook and a pen? Right. Like, everyone has a notebook and a pen. And then all of a sudden I'm in a meeting without a notebook and a pen. I'm like, like this is how the world evolves. But but I think exposing people so that they are ready and they do have those skills and doing it while you're in role and helping them move around. And I think also talking about older generation. We're in a workforce right now that there's 5 generations in the workforce, first time ever or something crazy like that. But I think about when I moved to UNLV as an assistant director, one of the women who was a registrar and did events for us, probably 20, 30 years older than me. And what I found is it's just, how do you respect people and where they are? Make sure that everyone is seen and that you can move a team forward together. And then get out of your own way, of your own insecurities of what age means. You're in a role for a certain reason.
Right.
If you can respect and empower other people, you can all do kind of.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you're in the role for a reason.
That's right.
And tap into that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Regardless of what the age conversation is.
Tap into it humbly.
Yes.
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 Very much so. I learned that very quickly.
I mean, we all learned some lessons, right?
Yes.
Myra seeks consensus.
Yeah, I do. I try because I'm very much, I wouldn't say my way or the highway, but my way and maybe the berm, but that's about it. So, and that is something. But do you sometimes think, man, if I could go back and talk to 22-year-old Myra, I would do some coaching for being more relaxed in some of the positions.
Yeah. I might have fixed my face in some meetings faster.
I still need to do that. I can't play poker.
I learned how to fix my face, but my skin tone, like if I'm upset, then like the red thermometer comes up and I'm like, my face seems fine, but I don't think I don't think this is yeah. I mean, I just think it's relaxing. I think striving, especially if you're a woman that wants to move forward in career, it's how do you move to the next? How do you give your all? How do you make some things happen? And I feel lucky that I'm where I am now, and I can kind of step back and sometimes not put that pressure on myself. And it feels like this future generation has the ability to be a little more, and we maybe all are like, that's not fair. We had to work harder. But I think it's also like, that's amazing that you can see that already.
Yeah.
And I think it will make for a healthier, better future for people.
Absolutely. And you have to wonder, was it us teaching our children? Like, I started working 18 and I've not stopped. Especially in the collegiate world, like that's a lot. There's a lot of times where you're there for a lot of hours just because what's happening with the campus and the environment. I like to joke that the first Labor Day I ever had off as an adult was here. I had never had Labor Day off. I worked in the South, school starting. What are you talking about, a day off?
Yeah.
So I do appreciate that some of the generations coming up, and it has to be us that was like, we're not going to let our kids do what we did maybe. But yeah,
we might have swung a little too far. I mean, we'll see.
Agree.
I don't know. Yeah.
But there's a distinct difference. So it is so interesting. And I always love that about being on a college campus all the time. First of all, I think it keeps you young.
That's right.
Like, the slang, what's happening. I can work my phone like a 20-year-old. I'm very impressed by that. But I do think that as you got to engage with all of these different, it seems like every 4 years, it's a brand new set of thoughts, processes. And maybe I miss that about being on campus every day.
I definitely miss that for sure. I mean, that's the piece that as you move into other careers that aren't student facing and direct student access, it's like a constant reminder to yourself of who you're really impacting and why are you doing it. And I think you have to have a very strong why, for the industry and for the experience as a whole. And I think for me, as I've grown, especially now with the whole staff conversation being even more important, is that's where I find my why is, helping people at that level and the student impact. I will say though, when I was at UNLV and ghostwriting your whip was a thing.
Oh yeah.
And then I learned about it. I was like, I definitely want to ghostwrite my whip, and you all can videotape me while we do this. And so we did like a whole Halloween thing around it. That was super fun. Right? But I do miss that. I do have a 6 and 4-year-old niece and nephew, and I'm hopeful they're going to keep me young as they continue to learn new words, make them up.
Is that a thing?
I've got an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old, and they certainly keep me young and introducing to all sorts of things that I wouldn't necessarily have front of mind. Especially my 8-year-old as she goes through the younger grades now and all the things that or entering conversations in the social circles at that age. It's like, you're talking about that at 8? Okay.
What's something that's mind-blowing? Like, what's one thing? Can you think of one thing right now?
Say that one more time.
What's one thing that's mind-blowing for you right now with your 8-year-old?
Honestly, with my 8-year-old, it was her ambition to want to learn violin at 8. So it's something that she just out of the blue wanted to learn the violin, and her circle of friends, they're all doing their orchestra thing. I'm like, I just, as an 8-year-old, I was not thinking about playing an instrument.
I wanted to play outside
I was
in the
like,
mud.
where's my bike?
Exactly.
Where's my
It's
dog?
the same summer that she finally learned how to ride the bike. Like, we've been trying this for 3 years, and then she finally, like, this was the summer that it all clicked. And I think it was really cool to see as a father, like that aha moment where she learned the bike, and it set the stage for her to learn the violin. She had that moment of success, and she learned it on her own at her own pace. So seeing that transition with a new generation and what they can take away and how they're seeing the world and interacting with it, and it might not be exactly how I was at that age, and just being there to support her through that, it's really cool.
That's awesome.
I went off on a dad tangent.
I like it.
I love it.
I'm here for a dad tangent.
Well, lastly, let's talk about what advice you would offer to young professionals aspiring to take on leadership roles in higher education or food service management. What would you tell those upcoming college graduates?
Ask a lot of questions. I really just think it's about learning anything and everything that you can learn, because that's the one piece that I felt like I've always done in my career is, if you get a seat at the table, whatever table it is, pull your chair right up, be at the table, be engaged. Even if you think it has absolutely nothing to do with your role or who you are, ask questions, get yourself informed. You never know where the path is going to take you, and someday you're going to need to know whatever you learned in that one meeting that seemed like, what am I doing here?
I love that the questions are key, because if you're not asking those questions, you're going to miss out on something. Mm-hmm. So that is a great piece of advice.
And that was a life lesson my dad drilled in my head as a kid. Like, don't be afraid to ask questions.
That's right. And the thing that I've also learned as someone that asks a lot of questions, and in a room when people aren't asking questions, is everyone has the question.
Yep.
Who's actually willing to ask the question?
Right.
And be that person. Because someone else is thinking it. You're never alone.
Yeah.
Never.
So true. Don't be embarrassed to ask the
Goes
question.
back to being a trailblazer.
Right.
Sometimes that comes in the form of a question.
It does. And even, I will say, people that ask questions, it's okay to be nervous while you're asking them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right? Voice cracking, whatever it might be. Just what I've found is once you start, it's coming out. So just get started.
Just let it go.
Just let it go.
100%.
Well, I think we've had a wonderful discussion today, Kelsey. If there's anything that I think our listeners can take away, it's a lot of inspiration on the journey you can have in a career, the mindset of a trailblazer, and those takeaways for how to interact in higher education with relationships. There's such a fundamental piece to the relationship on a campus. It doesn't matter what function you're in on campus. You need to know your peers, and you need to know the community. But absolutely love the discussion today, Kelsey. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.